Could the father of the Highland Park shooter actually be facing criminal charges? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Reiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So here in Michigan, James and Jennifer Crumbley, the parents of Ethan Crumbley, the alleged gunman in a school shooting here in Michigan, are facing criminal charges for involuntary manslaughter. Of course, we've all heard the stories about how the parents kind of poo-pooed concerns over their 15-year-old son and his obsession with guns, and even provided him with a weapon, refusing him to take him out of school the very day he engaged in the shooting after a teacher had expressed concerns about his behavior. Those parents are being charged, and they deserve to be charged. With that in mind, though, it makes you wonder if there might be a similar case for the father in the Highland Park shooter. As we all know, on the 4th of July, Robert Crimo III climbed on top of a store roof and shot into the crowd watching the July 4th parade, killing 7 and injuring dozens of others. Initial reports indicated that Crimo was a self-described rapper who had uploaded videos of himself to YouTube. Well, upon hearing that, my wife, of course, went to YouTube to look at some of his videos, finding them to be deeply disturbing, obsessed with death and killing. Now, one issue that's been raised by some is the fact that Illinois, where this shooting happened, actually has some pretty strict gun control laws relative to other states in the Midwest. And Crimo was able to purchase this weapon along with others before he turned 21 as a result of his father signing off on a sponsorship form, essentially agreeing to oversee his son's use of the guns as a condition for his son being able to get a gun license before he normally would be allowed to. Well, that would be bad enough, having seen some of his disturbing rap videos. But then it turns out that police were regular visitors to the Crimo household. Not only were the shooter's father and mother regularly engaging in domestic disputes, having to call police to settle these issues, but they had to be called on numerous occasions as a result of the son at one point claiming he was going to kill himself, and another point claiming he was going to kill his entire family. That second call resulted in the police actually removing a whole series of weapons from the household, including a number of knives. But it was just months after that that the father signed off on the son's request to get a gun permit. Now, I understand that prosecutors are being very cautious on charges against the father, as the burden of proof in a criminal trial is quite high. As we all know, you have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt. A much higher burden than you have to prove in a civil case, which requires only proving your case by a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not, kind of 51% as I describe to my students. Now, there's no doubt that Crimo's parents are going to be facing a slew of lawsuits, but the reality is they're not particularly collectible from what I understand. According to the reports I've read, their houses have faced foreclosure, their business went under, and they've actually been on food stamps. So anyone who gets a judgment against them isn't really going to be able to collect much. Some justice, right? But criminal charges could provide a measure of justice to the families of the deceased and the injured. And again, when you look at the charges that are brought against Ethan Crumbley's parents, they could apply in the case of the Highland Park shooter's family. You see, involuntary manslaughter is probably best described as something akin to a negligent killing. You don't need to have intended to kill somebody. You don't even have to have behaved recklessly. You just need to have some kind of duty that was breached. And as a result of the breach, people died. Now, in the Crumbley case, you can see where, given the fact that Ethan was only 15 years old, they certainly had a duty to be more responsible with the way they dealt with him. But for the Crimos, their son was actually 21 at the time he committed the shooting. So maybe they have less liability? But in my view, they actually had more warning of the son's potential for violence, given the fact that the police had been called to their house many times, with him admitting that he was depressed and that he wanted to kill himself and others. To sign off on a gun permit after that, to me, seems like the height of negligence. And had the father not signed off on that, the son likely would not have been able to purchase the guns legally as he did. We're hearing now that the father, of course, wants his son to serve a long sentence and that he should have consequences for his actions. But my guess is the reason he's saying that is the father is trying to escape the consequences of his actions. He's essentially throwing his son under the bus to try to ensure that he himself does not face charges for his liability in this case. Sounds like a great family dynamic to me. But I hope the prosecutor in Illinois is looking seriously at bringing charges against the father the way the prosecutor here in Michigan is bringing the charges against the Crumbley's parents. In so doing, hopefully these prosecutors will begin to send a message across the country that parents need to be more responsible when they encourage their children to essentially play with such dangerous toys. Well, one thing we're always hearing is how the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And in this video, I call BS on that claim. Why don't you check out that video? I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.